Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, welcome. I'm feeling really energized. That was fun. So we are honored to have Dr. Michael Liu here with us today. I'm so excited. He did a fantastic, really memorable webinar for us in January of 2017 that kind of started our equity, access, and access to midwifery webinar series, and it was really fantastic. So we are in for a treat today. Dr. Liu will present Improving the Health of America's Mothers, Children, and Families, the Power of CPMs. Dr. Liu joined George Washington University in November of 2017 as the Senior Associate Dean for Academic, Student, and Faculty Affairs. Dr. Liu provides leadership and vision for the school's educational mission and coordinates services and supports to help all students and faculty succeed. Prior to joining GW, Dr. Liu was the director of the Maternal and Child Health Bureau for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services from 2012 to 2017. He led a federal bureau with an annual budget of more than $1.2 billion and serves more than 57 million women, children, and families nationwide. During his tenure, Dr. Liu transformed key federal programs in maternal and child health, launched major initiatives to reduce maternal, infant, and child mortality in the U.S., and was awarded the prestigious Herbert Humphrey Award for Service to America. Dr. Liu joined the federal government from UCLA Schools of Medicine and Public Health, where he held a joint faculty appointment in obstetrics gynecology and community health sciences for nearly 15 years. While at UCLA, he brought in more than $50 million in research and training grants. He was best known for his research on racial ethnic disparities in birth outcomes and his leadership in developing, testing, and translating a unified theory on the origins of maternal and child health disparities based on the life course perspective. Thank you, Dr. Liu. We are so excited to have you.
Good morning. Thank you, Keisha, for that introduction. And I just want to take a moment to thank the association for all your leadership and partnership over the years. Now, when Mary Lawler invited me to keynote the symposium a few months ago, I jumped at the chance, not only because I can never say no to Mary, but really because I want to come here today to say thank you in person to each and every one of you. Thank you for all the trust, the support, the guidance, the partnership, the friendships that so many of you have so generously gifted me over the last 6.5 years. Thank you for all the hard work and dedication and the commitment to improving the quality and safety of maternal care in America. And thank you for all that you do to improve lives for women, children, and families all across this great country of ours. So, in short, thank you, you rock. So let me just start by saying that I truly believe that in 21st century America, in the most powerful nation on earth, no woman should ever die from pregnancy and childbirth. And I also truly believe that in that nation, that every child and family, no matter where they're from, or the family they're born into, or the color of their skin, deserve a fair shot at reaching their fullest potential. Now, as a nation, today we still fall very short from that vision, but I truly believe that if we're ever going to get there, that CPMs have a very important role to play. And that's really because of the superpowers that you possess. I don't know how many of you see yourselves as superheroes with superpowers, In fact, let me just see this. How many of you think you have superpowers? All right, good. Okay. So I do, okay? And I'm gonna call out 3 superpowers that you have to really improve the health of this nation's women, children, and families, and I'll explain the science behind it. So this is your first superpower, okay? To help women, families, and communities build resilience, okay? So resilience is that ability to withstand stress, to bounce back when you're under stress. Now, if you watched the webinar last year, I talked about how chronic stress could be harmful to your health, how it could create wear and tear on your body's organs and systems, how it could disrupt your body's ability to maintain allostasis, okay? Which is, I think, is a concept worth repeating. Okay? So, and let me explain how allostasis works. So what happens to your body when you're under stress? What happens when you see a saber-toothed tiger? You run, right? And what helps you run faster is you activate that fight or flight response. You're putting out all of these stress hormones to help you run away from the tiger. Okay? Now, what happened after you got away? Your blood pressure comes down, your pulse comes down, and you relax. Okay? And that's the amazing thing about the human body is that it's self-regulating. It knows how to shut itself off once the stressor has been removed. Okay? And that's what we call allostasis, which means to maintain stability through change. Now, allostasis works largely by a negative feedback mechanism that's common to many biological systems. Okay? It actually works very much like a thermostat, right? So let's say, okay, the temperature in this room falls below a preset point. What happens? The thermostat kicks in the heat, right? But as soon as that temperature is reached, what happens? The heat turns off the thermostat to prevent this room from being overheated. Well, it turns out the same thing actually happens inside your body because when you're under stress, your body kicks in the HPA axis to produce cortisol. Cortisol in turn feeds back negatively onto your brain to shut off the HPA axis to keep your stress response in check. So that's allostasis at work, maintaining stability through change. Okay. So allostasis works well for stress you can either fight off or run away from. But what happens if there's nowhere to run? What happens if you can't get away? Well, you get eaten, right? But if you don't get eaten, what happens? Okay? In the face of chronic and repeated stress, your body loses that ability for self-regulation, so now you can turn on, you can shut it off. Okay? Biologically speaking, what may be happening is you get this tonically elevated level of cortisol, which start to down-regulate glucocorticoid receptors inside your brain, so you kind of lose that negative feedback. And we find in humans and animals subjected to chronic and repeated stress, they lose that ability for self-regulation so they can turn on, but they can't shut it off. And they walk around with kind of higher circulating levels of stress hormones. And if they were subjected to some natural experimental stressors, that they would put out a lot more stress hormones than what naturally happens. And this is when you start to go from being stressed to being stressed out. Okay. And I talked about this last year during the webinar and how being stressed out all the time could be harmful to your health, how it could lead to a whole host of chronic conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease and autoimmune diseases, and how chronic stress may actually play a major role in the pathogenesis of chronic diseases and the origins of health disparities today. I think Bruce McEwen at Rockefeller provides perhaps the best illustration of these concepts of allostasis and allostatic load in this cartoon here. Okay, so in this picture here, you see in the bottom image here, you see 2 kids balancing on the seesaw, maintaining stability through change. So that's a picture of allostasis, right? But what if I were to replace these 2 5-kilogram kids with these 2 500-kilogram sumo wrestlers? Okay? You put so much stress and strain on that seesaw that sooner or later, that seesaw is going to break. Okay? And what if a woman were to enter pregnancy carrying these 2 500 sumo wrestlers on her back? she's not going to have a very good pregnancy, is she? Yeah. So that's where your superpowers, number one, comes in. Okay? The power to help women and family and even community build resilience that will help them withstand stress so that they don't break in the face of stress. And I think CPMs are actually better at doing this than a lot of other people, right? You're certainly better at it than most OBGYNs that I know, right? Because most of us are pretty good at telling women what they should do and what they shouldn't do. But when it comes to supporting them during pregnancy, when it comes to helping them cope with stress and building resilience, we're actually not very good at it. So that's the superpower that you have. That's a very special power, and made even more special by some of you who are working in some very underserved communities where women and families are facing a tremendous amount of stress from poverty, from violence, from racism, from which there's nowhere to run and there's nowhere to go. So as you go forward over the next 3 days, envisioning what the future of CPMs is going to look like, I want to make sure that you don't lose sight of the special power, the superpower that you have. Okay? Help MCH figure out a better care model. Okay? Instead of just telling women what they should do and shouldn't do, help us figure out how to better support women and families, how to buffer stress, how to build resilience, and restore allostasis, which I think is going to be the holy grail for MCH. Right, this is your second superpower, okay? To optimize early programming. And again, I talked about this at last year's webinar. It's the idea that experiences early in life, including those when you were a baby inside your mother's womb, these early life experiences can influence your health and function for life. Okay? And this is based on the Barker hypothesis, which has been receiving a great deal of attention lately. Okay. What David Barker and his colleagues found through a remarkable series of studies is that they actually found this association between being born low birth weight and increased risk for heart disease, hypertension, and diabetes later on in life. Now, if I were to ask you, tell me some risk factors for heart disease, what would you tell me? Smoking, obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, low birth weight? What does being born low birth weight have anything to do with your risk for heart disease 40, 50 years later on? Well, what David Barker and his colleagues hypothesize is that there are these sensitive or critical periods during development during which the function of an organ or system is being programmed, and if things don't go right, if something goes wrong with that fetal programming, that organ or system may never function optimally over the entire life course. And let me just give you an example from my research while I was still back at UCLA around this whole notion of maternal stress and fetal programming. Okay? Let's say your mom was stressed out during pregnancy when she was pregnant with you. And we know that when she's stressed out, her body puts out all of these stress hormones, which in a couple different ways that could actually cross the placenta. So in a way, you're bathing the baby in all these stress hormones. You're priming the fetal brain with all of these stress hormones. I talked about this at last year's webinar, that there's something with the way these stress hormones program the baby's fight or flight response, the baby's HPA axis, that causes them to be more stress reactive. Okay? In a way, if you think about this, this actually makes a lot of sense, right? Because during those 9 months of pregnancy, what mom is trying to do is she's trying to get the baby ready for the outside world. Right? And if the outside world is stressful and hostile, what's mom going to do? She's going to try to get the baby ready for fight or flight by revving up this whole HPA axis, which in the short run could actually have some survival advantage, but in the long run could have some serious health and developmental consequences. In fact, we now have at least 13 studies that's linked maternal anxiety and stress during pregnancy to increased risk for ADHD in childhood, suggesting that there may be something with how these stress hormones influence the hardwiring of the fetal brain that may have serious long-term health and developmental consequences. I think what's most interesting about this whole business of fetal programming, this phenomenon called epigenetics. I know many of you have heard of this. What epigenetics is, it's basically volume control for genes. Okay? You can turn up or down, you can turn on or off gene expression based on your environmental exposure, especially those exposures during critical periods of development. You can do that in several different ways, but one of the most common way is by simply putting a chemical tag, and right here you see a methyl group, right? 1 carbon, 3 hydrogen atom. You put that methyl group directly in front of that gene, and that blocks that gene from ever being expressed. Okay? If I were to remove that methyl group, then that gene is freely allowed to freely express itself. So generally speaking, methylation turns off, turns down, blocks, silences gene expression, whereas demethylation turns on, turns up gene expression. Okay? And we think that what may be going on with prenatal stress is to actually control the amount of glucocorticoid receptors that gets expressed inside the fetal brain simply by turning on and turning off DNA. And I think this is actually fascinating because you could have two individuals with the same identical genetic codes, and they can end up with very, very different levels of stress reactivities for life based on what? Whether their DNAs are methylated or demethylated, which has to do with what? Whether mom was stressed out during pregnancy or not. Okay. And I think just to drive this point home about the importance of epigenetics, let me give you another example here. Okay, what do you see on this slide? You see mice, right? You see some, you see some blonde and chubby mice, and you see some brown and slim mice. Okay. Do you believe these mice are actually genetically identical? And see, all of these mice carry a gene called the Goody gene, which basically turns their fur coat blonde. That's the same gene also causes the mice to overeat, which then confer a high risk for obesity, diabetes, and cancer over their life course. But despite being genetically identical, researchers in the study were able to turn some of these mice from blonde and chubby to brown and slim simply by feeding their mothers a diet rich in folic acid during pregnancy. Now, folic acid, what does folic acid have anything to do with this, right? You all know about folic acid and neural tube defects, but what does folic acid have to do with obesity? Well, it turns out that folic acid is a very rich methyl donor. It's got a lot of methyl groups. So moms who ate a diet rich in folic acid basically methylated, silenced, blocked that obesity gene even before her baby was ever born. Okay. So imagine that, someday being able to tell our patients that we know how to turn on those genes that can confer upon your baby good health and longevity, and turn off those genes that's going to cause heart disease, diabetes, cancer before your baby was ever born. Okay. This is no longer the stuff for science fiction. Right? Because, in fact, I think the cancer doctors are about 10 years ahead of us. Right? They're figuring out how to turn on those tumor-suppressing genes and turn off those tumor-promoting genes, although I do have to caution you against extrapolating too much from one animal study, just right, because not all humans are rats. But this is certainly one of the earliest and best examples of how early nutrition can impact on your DNA methylation, and as such, epigenetic changes can have lifelong and perhaps even intergenerational impact on health and function. So again, this is where your superpower comes in, right? The power to optimize early programming and change that life course trajectory for that child and family. Okay? And you don't do that with a pill or a shot. You do that by helping women, by helping moms create a caring, a nurturing environment to buffer her baby against toxic stress, to show her how to nourish her baby with good nutrition and good nurturing. And that nurturing especially during those first 1,000 days, is what science is telling us is key to building a healthy brain. And for kids growing up in poor households, that healthy brain is that child's best ticket out of poverty. Okay? So as you go forward over the next 3 days, thinking about envisioning what the future of CPMs can look like, I don't want you to underestimate this superpower that you have. Okay? The power to care, the power to nurture, the power to optimize early programming and change life course trajectory for children and families to fully unleash their fullest lifelong potentials. All right, and this is your third superpower, okay, to advance the power to advance health equity. And this is especially true for those of you who are working in underserved communities, working with some of the most vulnerable women, children, and families in our nation. Okay? And you have the superpower because you're perfectly positioned to do this, right? Because you work in the birth centers, you work in the communities, you work in the homes, you see social determinants, you understand the root causes of the health disparities. You also understand that to achieve health equity in this country, we gotta do a lot more than healthcare. Right? We gotta fight those social injustices that are the root causes of health disparities. And that's why a few years ago, my colleagues and I from around the country put forward this 12-point plan to close the black-white gap in birth outcomes. We did it not because we had all the answers, but just to provoke some rethinking, a new national conversation about how we go about addressing disparities. Now, I'm not gonna go over all 12 points, but if you look at the first 4 points around interconception, preconception care, prenatal care, as well as healthcare access across the life course, these 4 points move us beyond our current focus on prenatal care to start addressing the healthcare needs of women and families across their entire life course. The next 4 points around enhancing systems integration, creating reproductive social capital, invest in community building, and creating reproductive social capital. These 4 points move us beyond our current focus on trying to change individual behavior to start trying to strengthen family and community systems. And last 4 points around closing the education gap, reducing poverty, supporting working mothers and families, and undoing racism. Okay? These 4 points move us beyond our current focus on the biomedical model to start addressing the social and economic iniquities that underlie much of our health disparities. Now, I know this sounds like a lot of work, okay? But that's really because there's no quick fix. Okay? To paraphrase President Kennedy, all this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, especially this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin. Okay. Here I'm reminded of my friend and colleague, Magda Peck, who many of you know as the founder and CEO of CityMatch. Now, Magda did this interesting project a few years ago where she went around the country and interviewed all of these great heroes of public health in the 20th century. People like Julius Richmond, who founded Head Start. People like Bill Fahey, who helped eradicate smallpox from the face of the earth. Okay. So after she interviewed all of these great heroes, she said that there was actually one thing that she found that was shared in common by all of these great heroes. Okay. One thing that characterized all of these great heroes of public health in the 20th century. And that was what she called an unwarranted optimism. Okay? They stay optimistic in good times and in bad. Here, I'm also reminded of a parable that I grew up with as a child growing up in Taiwan about an old man who just one day had decided one day with the help of his family to start digging at this mountain that obstructs the way between his home and his field. And when mocked by a wise man about the futility of his effort, the old man simply replies that I myself may not succeed in moving the mountain, but my children and my grandchildren will continue the effort, and one day the mountain will be removed. Okay. Now, so let's start digging, right? Let's move mountains. I know that's maybe hard for some of you today, under present circumstances. Some of you may feel like, in a way, we're kind of going backward in MCH, that somehow we're going in the wrong directions for families in this country. If you don't remember anything from this lecture, I just want you to remember one thing. And when you go home from the symposium, just promise me to do this one thing. Don't stop believing. Keep on believing because we have to. Kids and families all across the country are counting on us. Keep on believing because we can't help it. That's who we are. That's what we do. We just keep on believing, keep on working for a better future. Let me give you one more reason to keep on believing. I do apologize for those of you who heard this before, but this is a story that's kept me going for all of these years. Those of you who know my story know that I was born to two immigrant parents without college education. In fact, my mom didn't even go to high school or middle school. See, my mom was only 11 when her father died, so as the oldest girl in the family, she had to drop out 5th grade to go work in the factory to help support the family. So when they first got married, and when I was born, they were still pretty poor. So I actually born into this tiny little apartment on the other side of tracks in Taipei where a family of 6 was crammed into. No flush toilet, no running water. Health insurance? We didn't have health insurance because there weren't such thing as health insurance back then. Okay. So whenever you get sick, and unfortunately I was sick a lot as a child, you never knew how much the medicine or the doctor was going to cost. And so my parents actually had to make some of those tough decisions between paying for food and paying for medicine. At one point, my mom actually sold her wedding ring to pay for my medicine. So I didn't come from a wealthy family or an educated family. But none of that mattered anymore once we came to this country. Because it didn't matter because I knew that in a great America, you don't have to be rich to go to the best schools. And it didn't matter because I knew that in a great America, everyone gets a fair shot, no matter where you're from, the family you were born into, or the color of your skin. And I also knew that in a great America, if I just work hard enough and try hard enough, I can give my children a better chance in life, the kind of chance that my mom couldn't even ever dare dream of. And that my 2 girls, the granddaughters of a girl who had to drop out of 5th grade to go work in the factory, can now grow up in a nation where they get to be anything they want to be. That's truly what makes America great. But if my children can get that chance, why shouldn't every child in America get the same chance? If my children can get a fair shot, why shouldn't every child get a fair shot? So this is what we're fighting for. It's a fight for who we are as a people, as a nation. It's a fight not just to close the gaps in birth outcomes. It's a fight to close the gaps between what America is and perhaps has always been and what America can be and must be. And although I left Maternal Child Bureau a few months ago, I want you to know that I'm still in this fight with you. Okay? And I ask you to join me in this fight. If you still believe in America's greatness, if you still believe that every child deserves a fair shot, please bring all your superpowers, okay, and together let's fight for a better version of America. Together, let's fight for a more perfect union. Now, you and I, we might not get there ourselves, but we'll keep on digging and we'll keep on fighting, and one day our children and our grandchildren will get there, and that's what our work in maternal child health is all about. Thank you very much.